Okay, so walaupun kita sudah akan sampai ke penamat bab pertama ini, we will still be continuing on with this the things that we learned in chapter 1, we'll still be applying it in chapter 2, 3, 4 and 5 and 6 sebab pengukuran dan ini scientific investigation lebih berkaitan dengan penggunaan graf. Okay, ini tetap akan digunakan juga dalam bab-bab yang lain. So we need to understand this, and when we go on to other chapters, you still need to continue checking on these chapters lah every now and then supaya kamu boleh lebih memahami. So scientific investigation, kita sudah belajar tentang scientific method. Yeah, langkah-langkah yang kita jalankan untuk menjalankan eksperimen. Okay, kita sudah belajar tentang graph. I believe in maths, kamu sudah belajar tentang graph dan cara-cara untuk membuat graph. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do we use those graphs? Macam mana cara kita melihat graf-graf yang kita lakukan dalam satu eksperimen, dan bagaimana kita memahami graf ini. Okay, how do we use the shape and the information from the graph to help us in our studies? And so when we talk about graph, the first thing that you must begin is with interpretation of graph, ataupun cara kita melihat graph, okay, dan cara kita memahami graph berdasarkan bentuk dan data-data yang kita sudah dapatkan. So ini semua ada dalam kamu punya buku teks. Kalau kamu ada buku teks, you can open up in the first chapter. And you can see all of this information sebenarnya diambil daripada kamu punya buku teks. So there are different shapes. So if I go very quickly, ada pelbagai jenis bentuk yang ada untuk graf, kan? So ada graf yang menurun, ada graf yang menaik, melengkung. So each of these graphs and each of these shapes, dia membawa makna yang berbeza. So let's start with the first one. Graph number 1 is a straight line that passes through the origin. Di mana garisannya, okay, someone's coming in. Okay, welcome Naldo. So, first graph, straight line that passes through the origin. Okay, if you remember what origin is on the coordinate is 0, 0. That's where the origin is. So straight line that passes through the graph, meaning to say x and y both start on 0. And so the interpretation of this graph is y is directly proportional to x. So I can't select it. So kalau nanti dalam soalan exam kamu ditanya, kamu ditunjukkan graf seperti ini dan kamu ditanya, what is the relationship of y to x? Okay, ataupun the question might be, state the relationship of y and x. Then your answer would be, y is directly proportional to x. That is the answer. This kind of graph, the answer is y is directly proportional to x. Okay, and gradient of graph, kita boleh kira gradient menggunakan formula ini. And kalau kita tulis graph ini dalam bentuk linear equation, we would write y equals mx. Okay, now y tidak semestinya y and x lah. Kadang-kadang y dan x dia boleh saja diganti dengan perkara-perkara lain. For example, ada jenis graph. Let me just straighten out. So, kamu mungkin dapat graf seperti ini. So, x-axis is t, time, or seconds. So, unit dia ialah seconds. So, you might have 10, 20, and 30 seconds. And your y, they may replace with something like speed or velocity. So, velocity, which we calculate as meters per second. So 50 100, and 150. All right. And when we plot it, okay, it's not very perfect, but it doesn't matter. All right. So this is an example of a straight line that passes through the origin. So here's your origin, and y. So in this case, y is ms ataupun speed, meters per second, and x is, this is your x. So you will say speed is directly proportional to time. So that's an example lah. So you might get this kind of question in the future. Alright, so back to the slides. So that's the first type of graph. Next type of graph. Okay, so ini hampir sama dengan graph yang kita baru saja lihat tadi. Cuma beza dia ialah, satu ialah the only difference is that one goes through the origin. Yang pertama itu dia bermula dari 0, 0. Yang satu tidak mula daripada origin. So it does not start at exactly 0, 0. Or it does not, I shouldn't say start, but it doesn't pass through the origin. So interpretation of graph is y increases linearly with x. So sekarang kamu tidak boleh katakan directly proportional. You cannot say y is directly proportional with x, but you can say y increases linearly. So linearly maksud dia, kalau x naik 1 dan y naik 1, then that change will not be the same. In other words, linear maksud dia punya gradient lurus, tidak berubah, tidak melengkung. Alright, and you have your y-intercept here. And if we write it in a linear equation, we have y equals mx plus c. So if you have a question like this, then you might have a question that looks something like this. So you have x, and you have your y-axis, and you have a line here. So this point would be your y-intercept. So this is 0. This is maybe, let's say this is 30. I'm just choosing any random number right now. So that means if the question asked, state the y-intercept, then your answer would be 30. That is your y-intercept. So di mana saja garisan memotong axis y, that will be your y-intercept. Okay? Kamu sudah belajar bahkan tentang graph sebelum ini, or at least basics. I know you've studied some things about graphs. So yeah, and linear equation. So if you write this in a linear equation, you y equals mx plus c. So c is your c-intercept, so 30. M is your gradient, so kamu kena kira dia punya gradient lah. Right, for first graph, graph yang pertama itu kamu tidak perlu ada tu plus c. Kamu hanya perlu cari dia punya gradient. Nanti kita akan coba juga cari gradient. Okay, third type of possible line, or I should say, third type of graph is a straight line with a negative gradient. So this one, straight line with a positive gradient. Positive gradient maksud dia garisan dia akan naik dari sebelah kiri pergi sebelah kanan, dia akan semakin rendah pergi semakin tinggi. That is a positive gradient. Negative gradient is sebelah kiri dia semakin tinggi, sebelah kanan dia akan semakin rendah. So interpretation sekarang ialah y decreases linearly with x. So kalau positive gradient, y increases ataupun y semakin banyak. Okay, dan if it's going down, then y decreases linearly with x. Cara kira gradient pun sama. So we have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Y-intercept pun masih sama. Linear equation pun masih sama juga cara kita kira. Okay. Now, 4 and 5. So, 4 and 5 ialah di mana dalam satu graf ini, dia tidak naik dengan, I should say, graf ini tidak, dia bukan garisan lurus. That's the first one. Kedua ialah, dia bukan garisan lurus dan it may or may not pass through the origin. So, the first one is a positive gradient that passes through the origin. So, ini interpretation dia, kita hanya katakan y increases with x for number 4. So, semakin tinggi x, semakin tinggi juga nilai y. But, dia bukan linear. Maksud dia bukan garisan yang lurus saja. Okay? Kalau linear, if the gradient is for example 1, kalau x naik 1, y pun naik 1. Kalau x naik 10, y pun naik 10 juga. That's what we mean by linear. But ini sebab gradient dia tidak tetap, dia berubah-ubah. Mungkin mula-mula x tambah 5, y naik 5. And then x tambah lagi 5, y tambah 3. So, it's not steady. Jumlah dia meningkat. So, sebab jumlah dia tidak meningkat, kita tidak boleh katakan y increases linearly, tapi kita hanya boleh katakan y increases with x. Okay? And for the opposite is the same thing, curve with a negative gradient. Okay? Dia menurun. Does not pass through the origin sebab dia tidak melalui kosong-kosong. And so y decreases with x. And the final one, yang paling ganjil, bukan juga ganjil ni, tapi it looks different, ialah satu curve yang tidak memotong mana-mana ataupun tidak memintas, okay, or does not cut through any of the axis. So, kalau kamu sambung ini garisan pun, if you continue the line, you will still not pass through y and x. Alright? Or a straight line against 1 over x. So, sebenarnya ini dua ni sama saja. It's the same thing. So, So, usually for these kinds of questions, bila kamu cuba plot di graph, kamu akan dapat bentuk something like this. Or actually, dia punya curve mungkin lebih hebat lagi. Dan tidak pernah akan sentuh axis. Dia akan semakin hampir tetapi tidak pernah akan sentuh. So usually, kalau kamu nampak dia begini, kamu cuba tukar itu graph supaya graph dia ialah y. Instead of using x, we use 1 over x. Usually, if we do that, then tiba-tiba itu graph jadi lurus seperti itu. So then, the relationship between x and y is different now. We call it y is inversely proportional to x. So, kamu punya, one of the things that you need to be able to do ialah kamu kena biasakan diri dengan 6 jenis bentuk graf ini. Okay, sama ada kamu hafal. Okay, take some time to understand. And of course, bila kamu buat latihan semakin banyak, semakin lama, kamu akan lebih memahami jugalah when you keep on doing more exercises and more practice. Okay? So, takat ini, ada soalan? Any questions so far? Ataupun ada istilah-istilah yang kamu kurang faham? Setakat ini. Okay, I don't hear anything from anyone, so saya anggap sajalah tidak ada soalan untuk sekarang. So how does this help us? This will help us later when we are doing soalan-soalan experiment. So especially when we're doing experiment questions, you will definitely need to know these things. Okay, so let me continue on with the next question. So analyzing graphs to summarize an investigation. So tadi itu baru kita sentuh satu aspek graph, iaitu dia punya shape ataupun dia punya bentuk. Okay, tetapi dalam menganalisis, when we analyze or when we study a graph, there are 5 important aspects, or there are 5 things ataupun ada 5 perkara yang kita kena lihat. Okay, so the first one, relationship between the two variables, itu baru kita lihat tadi. By looking at the shape of the graph, we can understand the relationship between the two variables. Okay, the two variables being the x-axis and the y-axis. The second is the gradient of the graph. Berpacu kecerunan, kalau saya tidak silap. Dalam bahasa Melayu ini kita panggil sebagai kecerunan. The number 3 is the area under the graph. So kalau ada graph, kita kena cari apa area dia di bawah. Okay. Next is the interpolation to determine the value of a physical quantity, and we have the extrapolation. So buat interpolation and extrapolation ialah kita menggunakan graph untuk mencari satu value or to find a number. Alright, so relationship between two variables itu yang kita baru belajar tadi. Kamu melihat bentuk dia dan berdasarkan bentuk graph kamu boleh katakan, okay, y is proportional to x, or y is linearly proportional to x, y is directly, or y increases with x, or y is inversely proportional with x. There are different types of, relationship that exists between two variables. So you can use the shape to decide that. The next one is by calculating the gradient of the graph. Alright. The graph will mean different things. The gradient will tell you different kinds of things. So how do we calculate the gradient? Okay, kamu sudah belajar ini, y2 minus y1 over x2 equals x1. So if we try an example here. So kalau kita buat contoh, let's say kita ada x and y. And let's go 1, 2, 4, and 6. And here we have 3, 6, and 9. Okay, and we start from, let's start from the origin. We have one line here, one dot there, another dot there. Let's draw a line. And so how do we find the gradient? So sekarang katakanlah find the gradient. Okay? And you can try along at home as well. So guna saja formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 x1. So apa yang kita kena buat ialah kita kena cari 2 point lah. So we'll use this point. So in the first point, y equals 9 and x equals 6. 9 and 6. And let's use a second point. And in the second point, y equals 6 and x equals 4. Right? So when we calculate, we get 3 over 2. 3 over 2 or 1.5. So therefore, m equals 1.5. Okay, let's do another example. Kali ini kamu coba, kita buat lagi satu contoh. Kamu lagi cari gradient. Saya tahu kamu sudah pernah buat ini, but as a review for all of us. Okay, let's start. Kali ini, So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 2, 4, 6, 8. Let's have one line here. Let's have one line here. And another line here. Alright, so now class, take a few minutes, cuba kamu cari gradient ataupun M. And once kamu sudah dapat jawapan, go ahead and type it in the chat box. So M, remember, equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so go ahead everyone, try. And then when you're done, go ahead, write your answer in the chat. Alright, I have a few answers coming in. Okay, so most of you have got the answer. Very good. Very good. So, M equals, kita pilih je lah mana-mana titik. So, kita ambil titik ini. So, titik ini ialah 2, coordinate 2, 6. So, we go 6 and 2. We'll take this one as well. So, 4 and 1. So we have 4, 1, 2 over 1, or just 2. So that is your gradient. Your gradient is 2. Okay, another way for us to understand gradient is, we can also understand gradient like this. When x increases by 1, y will increase by 2. That's the meaning of this gradient. When x increases by 1, y increases by 2. Okay, kalau negative gradient, if you have a negative gradient of negative 2, when x increase by 1, y will decrease I should say, or y will increase by negative 2 ataupun dia menurun sebanyak negative 2. Ini yang dimaksudkan dengan gradient. So, kalau gradient dia tetap, dia akan kekalkan ataupun menyebabkan garisan lurus. Alright, very good. Let's go back to the aspects that we need to study. Alright, where was I? Okay, so relationship by looking at the shape of the graph, gradient of the graph by calculating using this formula. Next is area under graph. So in area under graph, kita tahu sudah macam mana mau kira area. I hope by now in Form 4 you know how to calculate area, right? You can calculate area using many formulas that you have studied already in Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, right? Now sometimes what we want to do is to calculate the area underneath the graph. Okay, so kalau ada garisan, okay, yang di bawah itu garisan itu kita mau cari dia punya area. Why do you want to do that? Area di bawah satu graph pun ada maksud dia, depending on the kind of graph that you have. For example, kalau graph speed over time, meaning here is speed and here is time, this kind of graph, if you calculate the area under graph will show you distance traveled. So by calculating the area under the graph, you will get the total distance traveled. Okay? Akan bergantung kepada jenis graph lah. Lain graph, lain makna lah area under the graph. So this one is also simple. cara mengira pun sama juga. So if we go into it, I'll give you an example and then you can try. Let's see, what kind of shape should I use? Let's start with an easy one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gradient is 1, so very simple. So this is a very simple graph. Sekarang kamu disuruh cari area under the graph. So when you finding the area under graph, kamu anggap sejak macam geometry. Is it geometry atau? I think it's geometry. Kamu anggap saja macam geometry. Apa bentuk ini? Triangle. Alright, so kamu sudah belajar dari dulu apa formula kita guna untuk kira area triangle. So so how long is this one? We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4. And here is also 4. So 4 times triangle. So 1 over 2. So we should say area equals 4 times 4 times 1 over 2. So 4 times 4 equals what? 16. 16 divided by 2 equals 8. Alright, so area under graph will be 8. Apa unit dia berdasarkan apa jenis dia punya, berdasarkan apa jenis dia punya unit lah. Okay, what about, let's say we use a different shape. Sekarang bukan lagi triangle. Let's say tiba-tiba kamu dapat bentuk macam ni. So instead of starting from 0, let's say starting from 2. So ini adalah bentuk graf kamu. Sekarang kamu disuruh untuk kira area under graph. So apa punya formula yang kamu pakai kalau begini sudah bentuk dia? Okay, you can use trapezium. That's one. Okay, or kalau kau malas guna trapezium, you can also divide it into two lah. Okay, you use rectangle and triangle. So dalam contoh yang diberikan dalam buku teks, dia bagi contoh kamu kasih bahagi kepada rectangle and triangle. So if we did it like that, we can do area, we can call this A and we call this B. So A, very simple. So what? This is 2 because 4 minus 2 equals 2. So 2 times, from here to here is 4. So 4 times 1 over 2. So 2 times 4 equals 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then area B equals 4 times 2. And so you get a total of 8. So area under graph equals apa salah tu? Area under graph equals 4 plus 8 equals 12. Or like someone said, you can also use trapezium. Kalau mau guna trapezium formula, sama saja jawapan dia lah. So you can go area equals, so formula for trapezium ialah apa? It's 4 plus 4 plus 2 divided by 2. Begitu kah tu? Times, saya pun lupa sudah. Itu kah tu? Okay, wait, let's see if I get this right. So 4 plus 2 equals 6. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. 3 times 4 equals 12. So yes, it's the same. So still correct lah. Okay, kamu boleh guna formula untuk trapezium. Kalau kamu lupa, kamu boleh bahagi kepada square and triangle pun, you'll get the same answer. Alright, so let's try one for you. Tekan saja buatkan. So, Okay, here's an example that, well, it's still easy. So I'm going to go ahead. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to start from 1 and end at 4. Okay, so now go ahead and try to calculate the area under the graph. And as soon as you get your answer, you can go ahead and type your answer. Kamu boleh guna trapezium punya formula ataupun boleh juga guna triangle and square and rectangle. Mana-mana pun boleh lah. Ini sebenarnya sangat senang nih. But as a review, bagus juga lah kita belajar nih. Alright, let's try and check the answers. So let's first use the triangle and rectangle method because that's the easy one. So we divide it into two shapes. So we have the triangle and we have the rectangle. So rectangle is from here to here is 1. Height of 1, length is 8. So let's call this area A. So area of A equals 1 times 8. So equals 8. Then we use the second one. So for second one, or area B, we have 1. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, remember it's not 4 because you're starting from here. You have to start from 1. So 1, 2, 3. So you have 3 times 8 times 1 over 2. Right? So 3 times 8 times 1 over 2 equals 12. So 12 plus, I'm sorry, is that correct? Betul lah betul kan? 3 times 8, yes, okay. 3 times 8 equals 24, 24 divided by 2, yeah, okay. So why do I feel like I made a mistake? Alright, anyway, and then 8 plus 12 equals 20. 8 plus 12 equals 20. So total area equals 20. So how did some of you get 24? Okay, if you started from 0, then yes, you would have made a mistake. Now let's try using trapezium method. Just to double check. So trapezium method is basically height is 8. No, we'll take this one as height. So 8 times, and we have 4, and on one end we have 1, so 5. So 4 plus 1 divide by 2. And so we have the whole thing, which is, let's see, 4 plus 1 equals 5. Yeah, so you still get answer 20. 4 plus 1 equals 5. 5 times 8 equals 40. 40 times divided by 2 equals 20. So you still get the correct answer of 20. So the correct answer is 20. So yes, so when you're using a graph, you have to make sure where the line begins. Okay, you're not always starting from 0. So that's the only thing that you need to be careful with lah. Alright, so that's area on the graph. Okay, next thing is interpolation. So interpolation is when you have a graph, and this time, okay, let me just. So interpolation is a method of trying to find a number based on the line of the graph. So for example, you have a curve here. In the picture, it shows a curve. And it shows titik-titik di mana dia ada data. Kemudian dia lukis garis untuk kasih sambung ini data. So what interpolation is kamu guna graph ini and then you say something like, okay, kalau X ialah 2, berapa nilai Y? So kamu ikut graph dan kamu buat garisan untuk menentukan lah. Okay, kalau X ialah 2 dan berdasarkan graph, okay, Y will be 30, for example. Or you might have something else. You might have a different. Okay, kalau 1.5, macam mana kamu kira? Okay, kamu lukis garisan dan kamu cari juga dan agak-agak nilai di axis Y. So this one, for this one to be accurate, 1, kamu punya line mesti accurate. 2, mesti kamu ada graph. Ini kamu kena pakai kertas graf lah yang sesuai. Ini kalau kamu tidak ada kertas graf, ini memang tidak boleh jadilah punya cara buat. Now interpolation tidak semestinya garisan lengkung saja. Interpolation can also happen with a straight line. For example, if you have a straight line like this, however, kamu punya data hanya 2 titik saja. So for example, you have 2, 4, 6, and 8, and you have 3, 6, 9, 12. Dan kamu hanya ada data untuk titik ini, and titik ini. So you only have 2, 6, and here you have 8, 12. Alright. So kamu buat satu garis lurus lah. Sorry, garis saya tidak berapa lurus pula. So sekarang, cara kita lakukan interpolation ialah kalau X ialah 6, berapa nilai Y? So we use data yang kita sedia ada untuk buat anggaran berapa nilai Y. That's what we call interpolation. Ataupun kamu mungkin kena suruh, if Y equals 9, what is the value of X? Pun sama juga cara yang sama. So you have 9 dan kamu guna graph untuk buat anggaran. So this is what we call interpolation, di mana kita guna data yang kita sedia ada dan cuba cari jumlah-jumlah yang ada di tengah-tengah, kita buat anggaran lah. And the other one is extrapolation. Extrapolation hampir sama juga, sebab dua-dua kita kena buat macam ramalan ataupun kita kena menggunakan graph untuk So interpolation dan extrapolation pun hampir sama juga kerana kita menggunakan graph untuk buat anggaran ataupun membuat ramalan nilai satu data sama ada X ataupun Y. Cuma beza dia, untuk interpolation kita sedang mencari nilai di tengah-tengah garisan ataupun graf yang kita sedia ada. Right, kita sudah membuat graf dan kita hanya mencari titik-titik pada graf ini yang sudah kita tetapkan. Extrapolation ialah dari graf yang kita sedia ada, kita panjangkan. Kita bayangkan graf ini dipanjangkan. Dan dari garisan yang kita panjangkan itu, kita membuat ramalan nilai X ataupun Y. So interpolation so the difference between interpolation ialah interpolation dia menggunakan garisan yang sedia ada. So for example, let's say kamu ada nilai 0, 2, Sorry, that's not even 0 too. How can I say that? Alright, let me just do this properly. 1, 1, let's say 1, 2, and let's make this 2, 4, 6, 3. So kita ada satu titik di sini dan satu titik di sini. Maksudnya kita hanya ada 2 titik data saja. Interpolation ialah kita hanya mencari di antara ni 2 titik saja. Itu ialah interpolation. So kita boleh buat anggaran lah seperti ini. Itu ialah interpolation. Extrapolation ialah kita kena panjangkan garisan yang sedia ada untuk membuat ramalan. That's the difference between interpolation and what's the other one? Interpolation and extrapolation. Tetapi dia punya konsep ataupun idea hampir samalah, iaitu kita buat ramalan berdasarkan graf. Alright, so sekarang kita akan coba. Okay, write down these 5 questions. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F. So, tulis dulu ini 5 soalan dalam buku kamu. And tell me when you're done writing it down. So, only 6 questions. Okay, kalau sudah siap salin soalan, tulis done dalam chat. Ataupun siap. Wait, I'm not showing you the correct one, sorry. There you go. Okay, so salin ini 6 soalan. Siap salin, cakap siap ataupun write down done. So that I can show you the graph. Alright, so here's the graph. So here's the graph. Saya mau kamu jawab itu soalan. And bila kamu siap menjawab, I want you to sekali lagi kamu type done or kamu type siap. Alright, saya tidak akan tunggu lagi. So kita teruskan saja dengan question A and question B. So question A is gradient of the graph. So kita cari dulu dengan gradient of the graph lah. So kalau kita lihat graph di sini, okay, titik yang pertama ialah 40, 20. So let's take yang paling hujung di sini. So let's take Y is 20 and X is 40. Minus, yeah, let's take a look at the graph again. Kita ambil titik yang sini, 10, 10. So 10, Y is 10, X is also 10. Right? So we go ahead and calculate. So 10 over 30. Or 1 over 3. So gradient is 1 over 3. Now B, we look for the area. Okay. Sekarang betul sudah kan? Ataupun masih tersilap? Oh, we can double check. Kita buat triangle method lah. So, kita buat area A and area B. Area ialah rectangle. 30 kali 10. Area B is 30 kali 10 kali 1/2. So, 300 tambah 150. So, 450. So, yeah, 400 lah. 450 dia punya area under the graph.